So, question. If you make a cake at home, does it automatically count as homemade, even if it came from a box? Boxed cake mixes gave new meaning to what we consider homemade. Now, to all my foodie friends out there, before your outrage about pre-mixed, dehydrated bags of flour and sugar get out of hand, the history of the boxed cake mix is as much about psychology as it is about making cake. It all started back in 1930 with a guy named John Duff of P. Duff & Sons, a Pittsburgh-based molasses company. Now, during the Depression, Duff was looking for a way to use up his extra molasses. And he discovered that by dehydrating the molasses and combining it with other dry ingredients like flour and sugar and dried egg, he could create a gingerbread mix that he could sell in a box. The mix allowed women to make gingerbread by simply adding water. Now, at that time, families were really looking for simple, inexpensive ways to enjoy cake, and Duff's invention fit the bill. By 1935, sales were just okay. But Duff couldn't understand why these boxes weren't flying off the shelves. He did a little bit of informal research, and he discovered that women actually felt guilty for only having to add water. It was like they weren't really making the cake. So he changed the recipe to include the addition of fresh eggs to the batter. And guess what? Sales soared. By 1950, other brands had gotten into the add your own egg game, promising consistency and speed and convenience, guaranteeing a perfect cake every time you bake. Make it yourself in just 4 minutes. And my personal favorite, it's a speedy way to make a man say, ah. Check out this 1950s TV commercial.
When you make a cake from a mix, which do you want? A fresh egg cake or a cake made with dried eggs? For higher, lighter, tastier cake, why, fresh eggs, of course. But remember, all cake mixes are not alike. Betty Crocker cake mixes are different. They call for your eggs, added by you at home. It's the only national cake mix brand that lets you add the eggs. There's a reason why there are no dried egg whites, no dried egg yolks in Betty Crocker cake mixes. When you add the eggs, you're sure to get finer cakes most consistently. 9 out of 10 homemakers in recent tests said Betty Crocker cake mixes gave them bigger, taller cakes than the dried egg cake mixes they tested. Yes, and better tasting cakes, too. Try Betty Crocker Party Cake Mix for yellow, white, or spice cakes.
But just when it looked like the cake mix trend was taking over, sales began to plateau again in the mid-50s. General Mills hired a psychologist and a marketing specialist named Ernest Dichter, who would later be known as the father of the modern focus group. And he discovered that just adding a fresh egg wasn't enough anymore. Women said they needed to be more involved in the creative process. So, advertisements in cake mix boxes started featuring detailed instructions for icing and elaborate decorating cakes, and sold the idea that it was much more than just a boxed cake mix. So, what does all this have to do with the price of eggs? Well, what Duff and Betty Crocker and others discovered was a classic example of the IKEA effect. Named after the Swedish furniture giant, the IKEA effect explains how people tend to value an object more if they make it or assemble it themselves. More broadly, we like things more if they require effort or self-involvement, like baking a cake or putting a bookcase together. Why? Because it boosts our sense of self-efficacy, a deep psychological need. It explains why we want to interact rather than just consume. We don't want to just read a blog post, we want to comment on it. We don't want to just watch TV, we want to tweet our reviews. We don't want to just enjoy a meal at that new restaurant, we want to post a photo of it on Instagram. Another great example of this is the hashtag segment of The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. Now, if you've never seen it, they put out a hashtag prompt on Twitter and ask viewers to respond. They sift through all the responses, and then Jimmy Fallon reads the best ones on air. But even if most viewers don't tweet their stories, they imagine what they would tweet, and they feel a positive sense of imagined involvement. Check out my recent blog post to dig into the research behind imagined involvement and the IKEA effect, and learn what it's all about. And for more about how the brain works and how to make it work better, check out my book, Happier Hour with Einstein, and the full-color companion gratitude journal, available now on Amazon.